chance to get copies of those recordings. So we will try to work with the FBI to figure out, along with your staff, how we can obtain copies of those.
One individual was a 51-year-old who had paid $80 to rent a 6-month-old child to come to the border. They know if they come as a family, they'll get special treatment at a port.
George H.W. Bush pardoning Caspar Weinberger, pardoning the 5 people on the eve of their trial. Nobody ever suggested obstruction of justice against President Bush.
The whistleblowers are coming forward because they believe Attorney General Bill Barr and John Durham are willing to get to the bottom of it. It's people that perhaps were afraid under previous leadership to actually say, well, we knew this was wrong. They're coming forward now.
George Stephanopoulos' good friend Hillary Clinton took information from a foreign government.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host.
As always.
And you, my listening audience, my friends, my congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent listening audience.
As always.
Good to have you in the conversation. By the way, just a quick programming note. I had a tooth extracted this morning. First time it's ever happened to me in my life. I have every other one of my teeth, but this one needed to be pulled because of some damage to the root, so that's out of there. But the anesthesia is not completely worn off. So if I try to smile, my smile is going to be all lopsided, and people are going to think there's something really wrong with me. And so I have threatened Jeff not to say or do anything funny.
No.
But he keeps trying. He won't quit trying.
No, I didn't even mention you sound a little like Bernie Sanders today.
See what I'm saying?
I didn't do that.
Yeah, he didn't do that.
Yeah.
So he's going to try to make me laugh through the whole program just so I'll look funny on the video streaming. Anyway, good to have you in the conversation. I can talk. I can still feel a little fuzziness up here where the tooth used to be, but I think we will be able to limp along through this whole
Yeah, your
deal.
smile isn't quite what it used to be, though.
No, it's about half of what it used to be. So, and see, that's Jeff again. He's trying to get me to smile, get me to laugh, so I'll look like a loony bird.
No,
so,
I wouldn't do that.
Nah, just teasing. Jeff wouldn't do that to me.
No.
Yeah,
No.
see how emphatic he was about
Yeah.
that? I believe him. I don't know about you, but I believe him. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. Just a reminder, Father's Day is coming up. And I want to, on my Life and Liberty Minute today, one of the things I emphasize is the importance of fathers taking the lead and making sure that their families have dinner together. Turns out that there's a tremendous connection between family dinners and mental health for teenagers, for adolescents. They thrive on it. It's critically important to them. It's kind of a lost art in our culture, but I want to challenge you, if you're a dad, to do two things. Get my book, The Boy to Man book, at afastore.net. Shameless plug. And the second thing is take the lead in having your family sit down as often as possible for dinner. We did that as a family. Some of the great times we had is sharing stories together from the day, reconnecting as a family, talking about what was coming up that night or in the week ahead. I encourage you to do it. And some of the studies, for instance, there was a study in New Zealand that showed that junior high students who enjoy frequent family meals have higher levels of emotional well-being and lower levels of depression. Now check this out. A study that was done in Iran, of all places, adolescents, teenagers who have regular family meals were less likely to suffer from anxiety, insomnia, and all types of mental disorders. Family meals are linked to lower levels of suicide, higher levels of self-esteem among adolescents, and, interestingly, among adults who shared family meals, when they were adolescents. In other words, it had a permanent impact on their mental and emotional well-being for the rest of their lives. So do it. You will not regret it. Now, I want to turn our attention to the Word of God just for a minute. I think if there's any one thing that we love as believers, or long for, look forward to, it's a day when the world will be the home of righteousness. A world in which righteousness will find a home in this world. In fact, the word that Peter uses in this passage to describe righteousness dwelling, a new earth in which righteousness dwells, refers to permanent settlement, housing permanently. So we want an earth which is a permanent home for righteousness. Right now, you look around, and this world is not particularly hospitable to righteousness. Even the Cartoon Network now is entering into LGBT activism. They're promoting homosexuality with their characters. They're telling their viewing audience, which is kids, to stand tall, stand proud for homosexuality. These kids don't even know what that is. And yet the Cartoon Network is out there promoting this, promoting same-sex behavior, even among the children that watch the Cartoon Network. So this is not a world right now that is a home for righteousness. This world is hostile to righteousness. But Peter says there's a day coming when that's all going to be reversed, where this world will be the home of righteousness. Righteousness will have a permanent and settled dwelling in this world. And Peter describes that coming day and says there's something that you and I can do about that. First, he says this day, we talked about it yesterday, this day when the heavens and the earth are going to be remade will come like a thief. You won't see it coming. And here's what Peter says, that this is going to happen when the heavens will be set on fire and dissolved, and the heavenly bodies, literally the elements, will melt as they burn. Now, element just means a basic, fundamental, essential building block. And then he uses the phrase he uses is that the heavens will be set on fire when they are dissolved. You know what the word dissolved means? It means to loose. It means to release. You know, we know from what physicists tell us that the heart of the atom, the nucleus, there's a mysterious process there that nobody understands. Scientists are still looking for the nuclear glue. In other words, you get inside an atom, and what you have at the heart of that atom are two positively charged, whatever you call them, protons. What is a proton? What do you call it? Yeah, I don't know, a proton, but is it it's not a molecule. What is it? Anyway, you have at the nucleus, you have a proton, two protons or more, depending on the chemical makeup of the element or the material. And what do we know about positively charged elements? They repel each other. That's why you try to bring magnets together, and they repel. They'll pull apart if you using the same charge to try to bring them together. And I think what Peter is saying, the way the world is going to end, the heavens are going to be consumed. It's going to be like a giant fireball. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to get our families together. We're going to get beach chairs, and we're going to go sit out under the stars and watch the heavens explode. It's going to be like a 4th of July display that you've never seen in your entire life. Because what God is going to do is he's going to dissolve that nuclear glue. You know, we find out in Colossians 1 that God is the one who is holding the earth together. In him, well, they're talking about Jesus actually, in him and by him, the earth consists. The earth is held together. That is, the nuclear glue we discover from the Bible is Christ. He's the one that's holding the entire universe together. So if he ever gets to the point where he decides he's not going to hold everything together anymore, he's just going to let it go, everything is going to turn into a big, giant, huge fireball. There's going to be a thermonuclear meltdown, and we're going to see that in the heavens. And Peter says they're going to be consumed with fire. The earth is going to be burned with fire, but the earth is not going to be consumed. The heavens are going to be completely consumed. They're going to melt. They're going to burn. The earth is going to be purified. You know what fire can do is it can purify. As it burns, it purifies. So the earth is going to be purified from corruption and from unrighteousness. The heavens are going to be remade. After this fireball, after everything burns, God's going to come in and he's going to remake the earth. We're going to get new heavens and we're going to get a new, retooled, remade earth where righteousness dwells. So you want to live in a place where everything's run right, everything's done right, all the right people are in charge, all of the wrong people are not in charge, then the new heavens and the new earth, that's what you want. That's what you're looking for. And Peter says an amazing thing. There's something that we can do about this. If you want the day to come when righteousness is at home on the earth, here's what Peter says you can do about it. Since all these things are thus to be dissolved, that's the dissolving of the nuclear glue and the nuclear explosion that follows. What's that? Basically, that's just nuclear fission is what that is. Remember, in order to separate that, we had to go to tremendous lengths to find some kind of power that would separate the atom. That's atomic or nuclear fission. That's what's going to happen. The entire world is going to be, entire heavens are going to become one giant nuclear fission bomb. Atomic fission, it's all going to explode and burn up. But here's what Peter says, since all these things are thus to be dissolved, what sort of people ought you to be in lives of holiness and godliness? So that's our job now. Our job is to be people who live lives of holiness and godliness, centered in God, revolving around God, revolving around what he wants from us, that we would live lives that are set apart to him, waiting for and hastening the coming of the day of God. Did you get that? We are to wait for the coming day of God, but we are to hasten it. We are to hurry it along. We're to speed it up. You know, a lot of people have the idea that in terms of prophetic events, God's just got a big giant calendar up there in his office, and he's just kind of waiting for certain dates to arrive. He's got a little stick pin on a certain date in the future, and he's sitting there waiting and watching. And then when that day comes, boom, he's going to make it happen. That's not what Peter was saying. He's saying that date moves. It's kind of like the nuclear clock. Remember the nuclear clock? It's 2 minutes to midnight, then they move it back to 3 minutes. Now, the second coming, the coming day of God is like that. The day when that happens, it moves up and it moves back, and it depends entirely on the conduct of God's people. We are the ones that are going to determine the coming day of God when it happens. We can speed it up by living lives of holiness and godliness. I say we do it. Also, by the way, Peter refers to the epistles of Paul as Scripture. A lot of people don't know this about 2 Peter 3, but Peter's talking about the fact that people distort what Paul writes because in them are things that are hard to understand, which the ignorant and unstable distort or twist to their own destruction as they do the other Scriptures. That is, in addition to the Scriptures that we have in the Apostle Paul's letters, they will distort the other Scriptures by which Peter makes it clear that Paul's writings were already at this time considered to be Scripture. Well, let's go to prayer, if you'd be kind enough to join me. Lord Jesus, I pray this day for myself and for my family. I pray for the listening audience of Focal Point and all of their families, every man, woman, and child in this land, all of our elected officials, including our president. And I pray that by your Spirit, we may all grasp the truth that there is a day coming in which the heavens will be destroyed by fire and the elements will melt in the heat. Please cause us to look forward to the new heavens and the new earth, an earth that will be the home of righteousness. In view of that day, please prompt us to live holy and godly lives, and by our conduct to speed the coming of the day of God. Amen.
He who shuts his ear to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be answered. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Joe Biden initially came out supporting a ban on federal funds for abortion. But after one day of taking heavy criticism from the baby murder supporters among his party's base, Biden voiced his support for using federal tax dollars to kill children. Planned Parenthood and their acolytes pounced on Biden so viciously, he changed positions in less than 24 hours. If a person cannot stand against the wicked hordes to protect the lives of the most vulnerable among us, they are disqualified from holding the office of leader of the free world.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Tomorrow is Flag Day, first observed June 14th, 1885, making this observance the 134th anniversary. Set aside to honor our flag, the Stars and Stripes was officially adopted as the U.S. national flag on June 14th, 1777, a year after the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776. What better way to honor our flag than to remember that this year we also celebrate the 205th anniversary of the Star-Spangled Banner. In 1814, in the midst of the War of 1812 with Great Britain, Francis Scott Key wrote the words to the Star-Spangled Banner. He was inspired by the huge American flag that flew over Fort McHenry in spite of the intense British bombardment. Set to music, it became the widely accepted national anthem of our nation. We have all sung the Star-Spangled Banner many times with our hands over our hearts. We all know the great first verse of this stirring song, but how many of you know the other verses? Most notably this magnificent and stirring verse, and I quote, "Oh, thus be it ever, when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." What powerful and convicting words. America is indeed a heaven-rescued land. American history makes no sense without God's blessings and God's preserving hand. America is not merely the recipient of fortuitous circumstance, but God's providential blessings and watch care. That's why we must be grateful to God, and we may pray that God continues to bless America in spite of her many faults, and may we be more deserving of these blessings. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, the home of muscular Christianity. You are aboard the USS Focal Point, which is a destroyer. It's a warship, not a cruise ship. The Admiral is on the bridge. The scriptures serve as our nautical charts. I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable first mate.
As always.
As always. Glad to have you aboard. Time to man battle stations, and this is, like I said, as a destroyer. We are out to destroy the strongholds of the enemy, the lies, the errors, the deceptions, and the deceit by which he keeps people in bondage.
Yeah, and I got to say, Brian, you're kind of living up to the term muscular Christianity. I mean, what kind of national radio host gets their tooth pulled an hour and a half before going on live radio?
Man, that guy
shows up to work.
I told my dentist, says, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm fine. I'm from Lewis and Clark country, man. I'm from Idaho. We grow them strong out there." Yeah. But yeah, he had to break the tooth into two pieces, and the dentist showed me the X-ray the other day, and he had 3 roots going up there, and one of them was curved like a banana, which didn't look good to me.
No.
And I asked him about that, and he said, and it came right out. He had to extract the 3 roots, kind of one at a time.
It's a little painful just hearing this.
See, I'm getting even with Jeff.
Yeah, it's working.
He's trying to make me laugh. I'm trying to make him upchuck.
Yeah, well,
that's what I'm doing.
It's working.
Yeah, it's just so kind of even, Stephen. One hand washing the other. That's how it happens when you're a member of a team. So anyway, so here I am, and and I appreciate and I don't know what I sound like. I'm probably sounding a little I don't know, because the anesthesia is not completely worn off. So I can feel a little bit fumble-tongued as the anesthesia is wearing off.
You're not doing too bad.
All right,
It sounds
so
fine.
if everybody can kind of make allowances for that, I think we will be fine. Want to let you know that I've got a column up, and a note to the executive producer. I'm not sure I understand the text, so executive producer, if you could send that, we'll move forward here. Anyway, the column I have up at afa.net is entitled Gay Marriage and the Date Which Will Live in Infamy. Remember, FDR said about December 7, 1941, it is a date that will live in infamy. And what I'm saying is we've got one of those dates in our culture. That's the date on which the Supreme Court issued its Obergefell finding, where they legalized relationships between people who were engaged in sexual perversity. And I go through and explain why that was a terrible decision, why it was a horrible, no good, very bad decision, and explain it constitutionally. Because it's not only bad and immoral and unhealthy and dangerous, it is unconstitutional. And I explain why in the column. So I hope you will go there. We're in Gay Pride Month. A lot of talk about homosexuality, a lot of talk about gay pride, a lot of talk about gay marriage. And I think it's important that we just kind of pause for a minute, look back, and take stock about how that ruling, the Obergefell ruling, how it lines up with the Constitution that we the people enacted. Remember, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and we the people enacted that. We the people created the Constitution. It wasn't forced on us by legislators. It wasn't forced on us by judges. We voted for that puppy. We enacted it. And we delegated certain powers of action to the central government. We the people did that in the Constitution. If they try to exercise a power that we did not delegate to them in the Constitution, they can't do it. And that's part of the theme of the column. So gay marriage and the date which will live in infamy, it's up at afa.net right now. All right, let's just jump into some content here. I want to begin by a little bit of Bernie Sanders. Remember, Bernie Sanders is an out-and-out socialist, and he's talking here about why he thinks that socialism is the wave of the future, and why he thinks that people are going to vote for him. Let's listen.
I suspect that a lot of people in this country would be delighted to pay more in taxes if they had comprehensive health care as a human right. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. You go to the doctor anytime you want. You don't take out your wallet. You have heart surgery. You have a heart transplant. You come out of the hospital. It costs you nothing. Your kids in many countries around the world can go to public colleges and universities tuition free. Wages in many cases are higher.
So wages are higher, you get to go to free college, health care is free, no waiting periods. Well, why is it? It says you have a heart transplant, you come out of the hospital and it costs you nothing. Then why is it, Bernie, when all of the rich people in Canada come to America for their surgeries like that? The more risky, the more high risk, the more significant the surgery is, the more Canadians come to the United States for health care that's provided by a capitalist system. How do you explain that, Bernie Sanders? And one other principal thing I want to address just for a second. He says that health care is a fundamental right. We're going to hear this a lot between now and Election Day. Health care is a fundamental right. We've talked about it before, but it bears repeating. Health care cannot possibly be a fundamental right. It cannot be a right at all for the simple reason that if something makes a demand on somebody else's wallet, it is not a right and it cannot be a right. Only way you get free health care is you have to demand, insist, coerce, force somebody else to pay for it. So health care can be a right. You can think of a lot of things that fit into this category. You look at the Declaration of Independence, which is the foundation stone for our entire form of government. The inalienable rights that we get from God are what? The right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to the pursuit of happiness or the acquisition and use of property. So life, liberty, and property. Those are the fundamental rights that God has given to us. Now, what do all of those things share in common? What do they require from other people? They require that other people and government leave us alone. My right to life, you just leave me alone. That's all I want, so I can live my life. With regard to my liberty, government needs to leave me alone so I can go where I wish. As long as I'm not hurting anybody, I can do what I want to do. And then private property, just leave us alone. Give us the opportunity to work at a trade, work at an occupation, develop assets, all that kind of stuff. Just leave us alone. Get out of our way. So a right is something, the only thing that a right demands of anybody else is the right to be left alone. You don't have to pay for anything, just leave us alone. But that's going to be the fundamental choice that we are going to have to make, because every Democrat basically is running on some platform of socialism or another. All right. He mentions this. This is interesting to me because he says this later in this speech. He says, if you are the Walton family, the wealthiest family in America, you get massive government subsidies because your low-wage workers are forced to rely on food stamps, Medicaid, and public housing in order to survive, all paid for by taxpayers. I read that, and I read that again, and I said, Bernie, what are you complaining about? This is exactly what you want. They've got a lifestyle that's completely paid for by somebody else. Their food is paid for by taxpayers. Their health care is paid for by taxpayers. Their housing is paid for by taxpayers. For Bernie Sanders, this ought to be paradise. So it just shows you, the hypocrisy of the left. They really don't even mean the stuff that they're trying to convince us to believe. All right. We talk a lot about immigration on this program, as well we should, and we've got major problems down at the southern border. And we've talked about them yesterday. All these people from Congo, from Africa, which is an Ebola-ridden country. They're having a massive Ebola outbreak, epidemic outbreak. These people are coming into the United States. They are not being screened. Nobody is screening these people. And they're going all over the country. They dumped 350 of them in San Antonio. San Antonio says, we're going to ship them off to Portland, Maine. You talk about a transmission system to start a nationwide health epidemic. This is it. Measles, mumps, Ebola, you name it. The lack of control of our southern border could cause a nationwide epidemic. Now, here's one of the other problems on the border, because we've got this twisted law. Well, I don't know if it's a law or a judge's ruling. I think it's a judge's ruling that if a child shows up with his family, we cannot separate the child from the family, and we cannot send the child back home. Children cannot be repatriated to their own country unless it's Mexico. We can repatriate them if they're from Mexico, but if they're Guatemala, Honduras, wherever, we can't send them back. We can't deport them. So what does that create? That creates an incentive for families to trespass altogether, to come running across our border, and it creates another perverse incentive to create fraudulent families, to show up and pretend to be a family, but be faking the whole time because you're not even related to each other. And one of the things they've done this as an experiment. They've done the cheek swabs and done the DNA testing among people that show up and claim to be part of the same family, and they're finding that a pretty high percentage of these people that claim to be families are not, in fact, families at all. And here's acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan. This is testifying before a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing this week. He talks about how bad this thing has gotten.
One individual was a 51-year-old who had paid $80 to rent a 6-month-old child to come to the border. We're very concerned about the incidence of fraud. We think it's a huge part of this cycle, and it's caused by the fact that they know if they come as a family, they'll get special treatment at a port.
They'll get special treatment. They come as a family. So this guy, if you can believe it, this guy is renting a 6-month-old baby. Now, who knows what happens to that 6-month-old baby when he gets across the border with it, when that little 6-month-old baby becomes his ticket into America. He doesn't care about the baby. He's just renting it. He's just using that baby as a way to get into the United States. You know, so you shudder to think of what happens to this baby and other children. And what they're doing, what you find is they've got a whole cottage industry in recycling these children. So one couple or one group of people will use a child to get across the border at work. So they take that child back across the border, and they rent it out to somebody else. And then they come across the border and pretend to be a family. All right. Well, another thing that we are monitoring here is this whole special counsel business with the Trump-Russia investigation and all of that business, and especially the obstruction of justice idea. Now, we had an impeachment thing happen, a process that happened in 1972-73 with President Richard Nixon. Now, here is Solomon Weisenberg. He's a former deputy independent counsel, and he's on with Alan Dershowitz talking about obstruction of justice, and Solomon Weisenberg goes back to what happened during the Nixon impeachment process when it came to obstruction of justice. Remember, people are saying, look, when Donald Trump talked about firing people, firing James Comey, that was obstruction of justice. He was trying to interfere. When he talked about getting rid of Rod Rosenstein, that was obstruction of justice. Here's what Solomon Weisenberg had to say about this, a lesson from the Nixon era of impeachment.
The Watergate roadmap, which was all about obstruction of justice, right? That's what the grand jury indicted people for. Never in any way mentions the firing of Archie Cox as an obstruction of justice. And I've looked at just about every book on Watergate. I don't believe Jaworski's people ever even thought about indicting anyone under an obstruction theory for firing Cox.
There is a precedent that's much closer, and of course nobody talked about it yesterday, and that's George H.W. Bush pardoning Caspar Weinberger, pardoning the 5 people on the eve of their trial. The special prosecutor in that case, Lawrence Waltz, said that was designed to stop the investigation, and it did stop the investigation. Nobody ever suggested obstruction of justice against President Bush.
Right,
that's the relevant precedent.
All right, so that's the precedent. George Bush pardoning these people. I mean, that stops the whole process right there. You pardon Caspar Weinberger, that's the end of the prosecution. And it never even entered somebody's mind to treat this as an obstruction of justice offense. And with Archibald Cox was a special prosecutor appointed by the Attorney General nominee Elliot Richardson to oversee the criminal investigation into the Watergate burglary. He had a dramatic confrontation with Richard Nixon over the Oval Office tape. Remember, Nixon had been recording his conversations on a secret tape system. Archibald Cox found out about that, and when the president ordered him not to seek any more tapes or presidential materials, and Cox refused, Nixon fired him on the spot. That was all part of the Saturday night massacre. But nobody ever considered that obstruction of justice because the president has the authority to do that. And if he's exercising his constitutional authority, he cannot possibly be obstructing justice. We'll be right back. Stay with us, folks, on American Family Radio.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
I've been following a Twitter conversation about prices at the doctor's office. One individual said major medical hospitalization insurance was the only coverage available when he was a child. His mom paid the family doctor out of her pocket when they went to the office. One doctor responded by saying that her parents still talk about the same type of coverage for us when we were kids. Yet another doctor said legislators should write bills to create these kinds of plans. But I tweeted back that the Affordable Care Act prohibits them, except if you're under the age of 30 or can qualify for an affordability exemption or a hardship waiver. Congress should repeal this prohibition.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
J. Warner Wallace.
I think we're blessed as Christians that we don't believe something that's not rooted in history. We believe something that had to actually occur. As Paul said, if the resurrection didn't actually occur in history, we're to be pitied. And that's the beautiful thing about Christianity, is it's something you can actually investigate. I'm grateful for that, because as an investigator, that's exactly how I came to faith.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
The purpose of government is to secure God-given or inalienable rights to man.
America's premier historian, David Barton.
John Dickinson, who's also a signer of the Constitution, he said, an inalienable right is a right which God gave to you and which no inferior power has a right to take away.
Wall Builders Live captures the ideas of the Founding Fathers and then applies those ideas to the issues of today. Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Hi, this is Dan Celia from Financial Issues. You know, the charitable gift annuity concept is more important today than probably ever. It is something that you have heard me talk about for many, many years. And right now, for now, the tax code is still allowing charitable organizations to establish a charitable gift annuity so that you can be guaranteed permanent income for the rest of your life. Don't waste any time. So many of you have IRAs, 401k money. Peel off a piece of that. Establish your charitable gift annuity so that you have a portion of permanent income that you know is never going to change for the rest of your life. Would you do it today? Call AFA Foundation, 800-326-4543. Extension 345. That's 800-326-4543, extension 345.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point. Excuse me for taking out my little gauze pad there. Blood-soaked, I might add. I'm waving it in front of Jeff. I'm trying to see if I can get him to pass out. It's not working.
No,
not working so far.
Let's keep moving.
Okay. Anyway, let's see. Where was I going? I started out going somewhere.
Oh, were you going to talk about Mark Meadows or do the Reed report?
Well, let's do the Reed report, and maybe I will think about what it was I was going to talk about.
Okay.
So. Jeff Reed, the triple threat dude, he can be the producer, he can be the broadcast engineer, and he can be an investigative reporter, all rolled into one. So let's bring Jeff in to do today's Reed report.
But I didn't get a tooth pulled, so you're still winning that one right there. So, this is not a story that I bring with any happiness or glee. The popular girls magazine, Teen Vogue, has just published an article explaining to a pregnant 16-year-old girl that had written in how to abort her baby despite her parents' beliefs or permission. And this is what's troubling about this is this advice columnist lady in the magazine who is she's neither a doctor, a lawyer, or a professional counselor, but she's giving this girl all this advice. And it goes beyond just how to go about it. She actually post advice on how to go around the legalities of judicial bypass procedure. Also provided a link to pro-abortion legal advice councils and to people that would help her pay for her abortion. So this is to a 16-year-old girl. And one of the quotes in her response to the girl is like, it's only logical that if teens are mature enough to become parents, they are mature enough to decide whether or not they want to give birth. That's just sad. It's having access to abortion should be your right, regardless of your parents' beliefs.
Wow.
And you know what? I guess this isn't real surprising because I do remember in 2017, Teen Vogue had published almost 63 pro-abortion articles or related articles in their magazines. That's just terrible.
Man, Teen Vogue.
Yeah.
You know, that used to be, I've never read it, but back in the day, I remember seeing it on newsstands and stuff. Seemed like it was all about teenage girls' fashions and kind of dating tips and stuff like that. And now it's how to get an abortion without your parents knowing anything about it.
Yeah, and
So-
I don't know. That should be illegal. You'd think there would be
Well,
some
you know, it
prosecution.
is. And Planned Parenthood, that's one of the scandals of Planned Parenthood. They will cooperate with these people that are trying to get around the law. You know, we did a lot of work in Idaho when I was there working with a pro-family group to get parental consent laws on the books
Yeah.
and to make it illegal for a girl, a teenager, to get an abortion without the consent of her parents, and also to have laws that required mandatory reporting of child sexual abuse. So if you have knowledge that someone has sexually abused a minor, you have a legal duty to report that. Well, every time a Planned Parenthood would have a 12 or 13-year-old or 14-year-old girl come into their clinic pregnant, that was proof that sexual abuse of a minor had taken place, and they would not report it. It would be breaking the law. So that, I guess, that game of cat and mouse, grisly as it is, still going on. All right, well, thank you, Jeff. I just found a story about the Cartoon Network. It's right up there with Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel. And these are channels that are favorited by children now. Like Teen Vogue, that's targeted to teenage girls. The Nickelodeon, the Disney Channel, Cartoon Network, is aimed directly at kids. And so parents are having their kids sit down thinking this is safe. What could be safer than the Cartoon Network? And find that their children are being exposed to an agenda that directly contradicts the stuff that they believe and are trying to teach their children. So the Cartoon Network is doing it through their programming. They became the first show last year, the first children's show, to feature a same-sex wedding proposal. Their Adventure Time series aired a scene in the finale last year, showed two female characters kissing each other on the lips. And on their website where they sell merchandise, they've got a tote bag, they've got a shirt, and they've got throw pillows that all feature a decal of those two female characters kissing each other on the lips. Nickelodeon, that's another one that a lot of kids watch. They have a biracial same-sex couple in one of their shows called The Loud House. So, you know, we talked in the opening segment how we want a culture where righteousness is at home. It's not at home even in the cartoons, even in children's programming. Righteousness does not have a home. So let's get busy about living holy and godly lives, because Peter says that's one of the ways that we can hasten or speed the coming day of the Lord, when he's going to clean everything up. He's just going to burn with fire everything that's out of alignment and everyone who is out of alignment with his will, and we're going to start with a new heavens and a new earth. All right, thank you, Jeff. Now, clip number, we want to listen to Mark Meadows here. He's with the House Freedom Caucus, one of the really, really good guys on Capitol Hill. And, you know, we have gotten a real burst of adrenaline knowing that Bill Barr is on the beat. Bill Barr, the new Attorney General, he's the kind of guy we've been looking for in law enforcement. and we haven't been able to find him yet. James Comey wasn't that, and Bob Mueller certainly wasn't that. Bob Mueller, kept 4 guys in prison because he wanted to protect a mob informant by the name of Whitey Bulger, who was like a serial hitman for the mob. So Bob Mueller knew that there were 4 people that were in prison. 2 of them died there. He let 4 guys rot in prison, including 2 of them died, even though he knew they were innocent, because he knew Whitey Bulger had done them. But he wanted Whitey Bulger out on the street to be his informant, so he let these guys rot in prison. That was Bob Mueller. So he's a crooked cop. But Bill Barr, everybody understands this guy is a straight shooter. He's probably going to be the first guy, this is the guy we've been waiting for, going to come into town, new sheriff in town, and clean things up. And Mark Meadows says that now that Bill Barr is in place, this is encouraging news, ladies and gentlemen. This is hugely encouraging. Now that Bill Barr is on the beat, now that Bill Barr is the guy wearing the badge, whistleblowers are coming out of the woodwork to cooperate with his office, because there are people that have been browbeaten, that have been intimidated, that have been fired, that have seen things that were blatantly illegal, and they've not had a place they could go with that information because everything was in the hands of people that were bent and corrupt. So here's what Mark Meadows says. Now that Bill Barr is in place, and this guy's getting after it, John Durham, the prosecutor, he's been at this thing for a couple of months, and heads are going to begin to roll. Let's listen to clip 4.
We're getting a lot of whistleblowers. Primarily, the whistleblowers are coming forward because they believe Attorney General Bill Barr and John Durham are willing to get to the bottom of it. So people that perhaps were afraid under previous leadership to actually say, well, we knew this was wrong, they're coming forward now.
All right, so whistleblowers are coming forward, and indictments are sure to follow. So, ladies and gentlemen, we obviously have to be patient, because Bill Barr's got to do his homework. He's got to collect the evidence. He's got to amass the testimony. He's got to write up the indictments. He's got to issue the indictments. But, ladies and gentlemen, heads are going to begin to roll. I believe that. I think we're headed for kind of a whole new era in Washington, D.C. under President Trump and his Attorney General, Bill Barr. Now, one of the big deals that came out yesterday is George Stephanopoulos. I didn't even bother to get the soundbite, but George Stephanopoulos was interviewing Donald Trump and asked Donald Trump if he would take campaign dirt from a foreign country. And George Stephanopoulos was scandalized. He was outraged. He was apoplectic. His blood pressure was off the charts, because Trump admitted that he was willing to do that. Now here's Molly Hemingway from The Federalist. She's responding to this thing, Donald Trump willing to receive dirt from a foreign country. Let's listen to what Molly Hemingway had to say.
George Stephanopoulos' good friend Hillary Clinton took information from a foreign government. If it is a huge problem to take information from a foreign government, he should be asking her and Democrats, Democratic National Committee, secretly bought and paid for this dossier that, by their own accounting, was sourced to government officials in Russia.
And this is. I mean, I don't know if these people think that nobody's paying attention, that they can do this stuff, they can say this stuff, and nobody's going to notice it, nobody's going to comment on it. But think about the Steele dossier and this whole Trump-Russia deal. They were sending agents and spies out there to get information from Russia on Donald Trump, getting information from a foreign government to try to torpedo the campaign of Donald Trump. Now, you might remember this. This is kind of a blast from the past. But our good friend, little Adam Schiff, head of the Intelligence Committee, and remember the backstory here is how horrible it is to accept dirt on somebody from a foreign government. So here's Adam Schiff getting a call from a guy that he thinks got information he's Russian, and he's got information that Adam Schiff is going to want to have. Now, did Adam Schiff say, oh, no, that would be improper. That wouldn't be right for me to take campaign dirt from a foreign country. You get out of here, erase this conversation. It never happened. No, here's Adam Schiff. And these guys were comedians. These guys were Russian comedians. They were pranking him. So they called him up thinking that they could prank him. So here's how the conversation went.
Well, obviously, we would welcome a chance to get copies of those recordings. So we will try to work with the FBI to figure out, along with your staff, how we can obtain copies of those. Well, I'll be in touch with the FBI about this, and we'll make arrangements with your staff. I think it probably would be best to provide these materials to both our committee and to the FBI. And so we'll make arrangements between my staff and yours on how to facilitate that.
And especially on the head of Russian mafia, Uncle Misha.
Uncle Misha? And
yes.
He's in Brighton Beach?
Yes, he's head of Russian mafia, and he's located on that restaurant on Brighton Beach.
And poor Adam Schiff doesn't even know that he's having his chain pulled. Uncle Misha. Uncle Misha at a restaurant on Brighton Beach. Oh, my gosh. Okay, but these are the guys that are pure as the driven snow. Now, one last soundbite. You know, global warming is blamed for a lot of things. By the way,
everything.
Everything. And here's a new thing. I hadn't heard this global warming being fingered for this before, by the way. But another story about Roundup surfaced about how there are trace elements of glyphosate. That's the active ingredient in Roundup that makes it kill weeds. And they have tested things like Cheerios, breakfast cereals, and they found trace elements of glyphosate that they believe is responsible for cancer. So that's the story. It's on CBS News, big headline. Breakfast cereals contain a cancer-causing ingredient. Now, what they don't want you to notice is that it was traces, little tiny trace elements of glyphosate. And one study that was done, I think, by the FDA, they determined the amount of glyphosate that actually would represent some kind of threat to human health. And in order to get enough glyphosate in your system from eating this breakfast cereal that has traces of glyphosate, you'd have to eat 118 pounds a day. You got to eat 118 pounds of Cheerios every day to get enough glyphosate in your system to be a problem. You know, and I've mentioned that study before was done farmers over a long period of time, like 1983 to 2009. They worked around this stuff day in and day out, spraying their crops, harvesting their crops. Not a trace. None of them came down with cancer. Not one of them. And it was like a lot of them, like 25,000 of them or something like that. All right. Here's something I bet you did not know that global warming is responsible for. Clip 7.
I think the bats plus the balls, plus launch angles, plus pitchers throwing hard, plus global warming is why there's so many home runs.
So baseball's trying to figure out how come so many people are hitting home runs? How come people are hitting more home runs than they ever have in the past? Major League Baseball is actually on a trajectory to set an all-time record for home runs. And the guys, this is the announcer for the Chicago White Sox, F.P. Santangelo. I got it. It's global warming. Case solved. That's it for today. Bow low before God, ladies and gentlemen. Stand tall before man. Stand in the gap, and never forget we are fighting to win a war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast